So Stan Cross. Stan is the Electric Transportation Policy Director for SACE, the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. And Jacob Boland. Jacob's the Project Manager for Advanced Energy. They both are collaborating with E4 Carolinas on a US DOE-funded 3-year project that deals with alternative fuel vehicles. And through that, I've gotten to know them quite well. They have really superior knowledge about the electric vehicle fleet and the charging infrastructure in the region and in North Carolina in particular. And Stan is going to spend some time with us talking about the region. Jacob's going to talk with us about the state of the state in North Carolina. And we have the bios up on screen. I'm not going to take time to dig into it. Just know that both of them are, top of the grade with regard to knowing what's going on about electric vehicles in the Carolinas and the region. So Khalil, if you would stop screen sharing, I think Stan and Jacob are both going to screen share and take us through a short PowerPoint decks.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to speak. As David said, I'm the Electric Transportation Policy Director at the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. We're a nonprofit working in the clean energy sector here in the southeast region of the United States. We've been doing this work since 1985. So we got a lot. We've been through a lot during that time, and are really excited to see sort of this dawn of electric transportation, bringing together opportunities in the clean energy sector, because obviously, the cleaner the power that's provided to these EVs, the cleaner the EVs, and also in the energy storage sector, as electric transportation drives battery R&D, and it all kind of starts feeding into each other in a really great positive feedback loop when it comes to both climate and economic development opportunities. This is my contact information. So if you want to reach out to me, feel free. It's also a picture of my electric vehicle and my dog Epi. So just to level set, I've been an EV driver for the last 7 years, and I'm totally sold on the technology. I get everywhere I want to go without any hassle, and I do it with a superior driving experience. And I save about $1,300 a year driving an EV instead of a gas-powered car, which gives me money to do a lot of fun things. So just to jump in, I want to first sort of take us to kind of an industry level. And, electric transportation is going to be driven by vehicles that are going to be provided by auto manufacturers. And just looking at the passenger vehicle sector, we're seeing a lot of movement. I'm sure many of you heard General Motors' announcement a couple of weeks ago about their commitment to electrifying their entire fleet by 2035. Other OEMs are soon to follow suit. What we're seeing in the near term is a rapid increase in both the number of electric vehicle models available, but also the type. We're moving from just your small sedan to larger SUVs, pickup trucks in the light duty space, and then in the medium and heavy duty space, buses are being deployed for both transit and school bus applications. And we're seeing rapid growth with freight technology, as well as sort of local delivery vans, as well as dump trucks and garbage trucks. And so you're seeing the electrification of on-road leading to electrification of off-road, and really seeing this, this technology starting to ramp up. And a lot of that is driven by the declining costs of batteries that are making, the vehicles more and more price competitive with internal combustion alternatives. When we think about the Southeast, I think it's important to recognize that there's an economic development opportunity in this region. There's over 20 facilities that are manufacturing light, medium, and heavy duty electric vehicles in the region, and there's significantly more supply chain companies that are working here. And the Southeast is already a major region for automotive manufacturing. And as the transition to electric vehicles happens, there's a lot of opportunity for the Southeast to benefit from that transition, both from the existing facilities here that are tooling up to manufacture electric vehicles, but also from the new electric vehicle companies like Tesla and Rivian and Lordstown and others who are expanding and looking to open up new battery production and auto manufacturing facilities. So looking at the region, we did an analysis last year with Atlas Public Policy, looking at sort of the state of the market. We'll be updating this report for the Southeast in August of 2021. But as of, through Q2 2020, you can kind of see how EV sales were tracking. For those of you who do not know, BEV stands for battery electric vehicle. That's a purely battery powered vehicle. And PHEV stands for plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. Those are vehicles that run on electricity but can also be backed up with gasoline. So sales have been growing, and what's interesting when you look at the sales data all the way through the end of 2020 is you see that sales have rebounded from Q1 impacts from COVID. And in fact, EV sales have rebounded much more significantly and faster than internal combustion engine vehicle sales have. So it's going to be interesting to watch as we go into 2021 and new models with longer range at cheaper price points come to market, how that growth is going to continue. It's interesting to look at the Southeast from a state-by-state perspective. This graph lays out the 7 states that we looked at for our market analysis. And 2 things of interest here. One is you'll see the Georgia graph, which is the red one, the Georgia line on the graph. And you see that spike in 2013 to 2015. That corresponds with a state tax credit that was passed in Georgia that provided a $5 tax credit for Georgia residents who purchased electric vehicles. So way back in 2013, Georgia sort of answered the question to what does it take to unlock the electric vehicle market? And it turned out to be $5,000. And that state tax credit bumped the Georgia market from 30-something in the country to at one point number 2. And the tax credit went away in 2015, and you can see kind of what happened to sales as a result. So that's an interesting sort of data point here in the Southeast. The green line is Florida, which is leading the Southeast. It leads the Southeast in both population and in EV sales. So a lot of that's correlated to the population in Florida. But in Florida is one of the strongest markets for Tesla. And the spikes that you see there in Florida are, as well as in the other states, are correlated to when the Tesla Model 3 came out to market and when they were able to kind of get to that fulfillment state of their production. And so Tesla's really been doing a lot to drive, that EV market here regionally, but also across the country. When we looked at the Southeast and sort of what's happening here with electric transportation, we looked at a few indicators, and there's a couple that I want to draw your attention to. First off, the Southeast represents about 18% of the United States' population. And when we talk about the Southeast, we're talking about North and South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, and Florida. So those 7 states make up about 18% of the country's population. And so when you take that into account and you look at just looking at passenger EV manufacturing, this is not including light, medium, and heavy duty manufacturing, for which there is a significant amount in the Southeast, but the data from which is really difficult to get right now. You see 14% of all EV manufacturing employment is happening here in this region. And as far as manufacturing investment, 28% of the EV specific investment that's happened nationwide has been brought to the Southeast, again, just for passenger vehicles. We have a number of medium heavy duty manufacturers here, including companies like Thomas Built, Volvo, as well as Arrival, a new startup medium duty company that's just come to the Carolinas, and many others. So these numbers go even higher when you take into account the medium heavy duty space. So those numbers are really strong. and sort of demonstrate a really solid foundation that the region has from an economic development and job growth perspective to capitalize on this shift to transportation electrification. Interestingly, when you flip that to what's happening at both for EV sales and for EV charging deployment, the region is lagging the nation, only accounting for about 10% of EV sales nationwide and about 13% of EV chargers deployed. So there's a disconnect between, sort of the manufacturing job creation opportunity and the actual state of the market when it comes to purchasing vehicles and deploying infrastructure. And some of that is correlated to a relatively low level of utility investment to date, as well as government funding for EVs. The utility investment has gone up. It's basically doubled since these numbers were calculated. Duke Energy was approved a $10 million pilot program in South Carolina and a $25 million program in North Carolina. So that utility investment's bumped up closer to $80,000 now, but it still represents just 1% of utility investment nationwide. And government funding for EVs that from states here in the Southeast, represents only 4% of the amount of state funding that's occurred for EVs so far. So those are two sort of indicators that have room to move, and certainly are places where I spend a lot of my time working on utility reform and state policy opportunities that can unlock that utility investment and can argue for government funding that's strategic, funding in technologies that also support reducing sort of taxpayer exposure. As an example, investing in transit buses where the total cost of ownership of an electric transit bus is significantly less than a diesel bus. So long-term savings are sort of available for cities and taxpayers as a result. So those are two areas where there's a lot of work to do here in the Southeast in order to fully leverage the manufacturing and job creation opportunity and to create a positive feedback where the manufacturers of EVs are seeing our region as a really friendly and strong kind of market in which to ramp up their electric transportation manufacturing.
Really excited to join you guys today. My name is Jacob Bolin. I work for Advanced Energy as a project manager and program manager of Plug-in NC, which is a statewide outreach and education program focused on electric vehicles and supporting infrastructure. So actually get a chance to work with E4 and SACE quite a bit. Stan sits on the steering committee for Plug-in NC. As part of Plug-in NC through 2020 and now into 2021, we've been focusing on really kind of trying to aggregate a lot of the happenings across the state, many of which Stan has already mentioned, and basically, release it into kind of a more comprehensive report that we've called the State of the State report. So we're just putting the final touches on that. Should be ready here pretty soon, hoping by the end of the month. So hope you guys will stay tuned for that. I'd like to share just a little bit about some of that information that's going to be in the State of the State report, and also really just, I think, emphasizes what's happening here in North Carolina right now as it relates, of course, to electric transportation and EVs. So I think the kind of the first place to start, and Stan mentioned this with Duke Energy, is kind of what's really happening across the state for utility engagement. So most recently, Duke Energy was approved for a $25 million electric transportation pilot. That ruling was in part of kind of their original proposal that was actually closer to about $75 million. It opens up kind of the door for quite a few really great avenues that include infrastructure deployment, school bus electrification, and also a stakeholder collaborative that will allow for stakeholders and interveners in that pilot filing to actually work with Duke to improve and propose basically a new opportunity for an updated filing to incorporate some other components as well. North Carolina's electric cooperatives have been really progressive in deploying interesting time of use rate structures and schedules as it relates to electric vehicles, offering rebate programs for residential charging equipment in many cases, and also building out a electrification network as part of kind of their comprehensive kind of electric cooperative family for public charging that includes both level 2 charging infrastructure and also DC fast charging. Electricities is really focused on strategic load planning for a number of their municipal public power utilities, and also are working to deploy some public charging across the state. So a lot of like really great engagement from the utilities, really from kind of a public standpoint, a cooperative standpoint, and also, of course, from the IOUs as well. In terms of executive action, many of you are likely familiar with Governor Roy Cooper's Executive Order 80 from a couple of years ago now. I think that has really kind of laid the foundation for the interest and kind of compelling policy conversations for North Carolina as it relates to electric vehicles, with a goal to achieve 80,000 electric vehicles by 2025. I was just looking at some of the numbers a couple days ago, and by the end of December 2020, we were sitting at about 24,000 electric vehicles. That does include both battery electric vehicles, as Stan mentioned, and also those plug-in hybrids, with pretty close to a 50-50 mix between those two different types. Additionally, Governor Cooper, I guess in the summer of 2020, announced a medium and heavy duty MOU that was part of basically a 15-state collaborative that basically sets us up to have a 30% ZEV purchase rate, so basically zero emission vehicle purchase rate for medium and heavy duty vehicles by 2030, with sights set on 100% zero emission vehicle in the medium and heavy duty market space for the state in 2050. So some really exciting things kind of happening with those kind of increasing medium and heavy duty electrification options and deployments. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a minute. Now, looking a little bit at some of the funding opportunities that are going around, most of that's going to be administered at the moment through NCDEQ. So many of you, I'm sure, are aware of the Volkswagen mitigation settlement that's been going on for quite some time here in North Carolina and nationally. There's been some really exciting momentum here in the state for both infrastructure and transit bus deployment, basically related to those funding opportunities. So this really kicked off in 2020 with some of these RFPs and awards opening up. It's allowed over 40 DC fast charging stations to be funded across the state. So you can see those kind of deployed on the map here, really kind of focusing on filling a handful of gaps from an infrastructure perspective that we see across the state, really focusing with that fast charging on corridors as well. So you'll see a lot of really primary travel corridors strategically placed for those charging stations. Additionally, it allows for electric transit and school buses to really be in the mix here. So we've got, I believe from the first phase of funding, 9 electric transit buses and 6 electric school buses were in the works for North Carolina. Those have not yet gotten on the road, but it's still a very exciting update nonetheless to have those awards announced and really start advocating for this electric transportation technology in the medium and heavy duty vehicle sector. Lastly, we've got level 2 funding applications open currently. That's going to be a first come, first served basis. It's going to be a little bit different than the DC fast charging perspective, but nonetheless, there's been a lot of interest and really has a great opportunity to build out public and workplace charging for businesses and organizations across the state. Lastly, I'd just kind of like to focus a little bit more on the medium and heavy duty transit deployment that is happening, that we do already have on the road here in North Carolina. So we've got, it's kind of hard to get an up-to-date count, but we've got at least 30 electric transit buses currently in operation all through the Triangle, Asheville, Greensboro, Charlotte, and a number of others. And that is not counting basically the 9 transit buses that I just shared with you from the VW settlement funding with NCDEQ. So, I think that it's really important to just kind of make sure that we're circling back around to not only the light duty market that Stan really spoke to, but also tracking progress from a medium and heavy duty perspective as well. And I'll just highlight, I know this image is a little bit grainy, but this kind of shows where those awards were for the medium and heavy duty vehicles through the VW settlement funding. So it's kind of a nice breakdown, kind of expands some of those areas, kind of a little bit further than what we currently see on the road with some of the larger metropolitan areas here in the state. So with that, I'll just leave you with my contact information. If you guys have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out. And also, I just encourage you to be on the lookout for that Plug-in NC State of the State report here in just the next few weeks. Thanks so much.
So Jacob and Stan, thanks a lot. Great information. I'm going to answer the question that people are going to pose to me in chat. We're going to have a lot of great slide decks today. We will visit back with each speaker immediately after this session to see if they choose to make their deck available. If they do, we'll turn them into PDFs and we'll ship them to everybody probably early next week, Monday or Tuesday.